Hi, welcome to P32 Workshop. My name is Jim Gary, and I'm here to talk about some of the work I've been doing redoing the brakes on my year 2000 Georgie Boy Pursuit Motorhome. This motorhome is a Class A unit, and it's built on a Workhorse P32 chassis, and a lot of motorhomes were built on those chassis. So this should be applicable to a lot of other motorhomes. If you look in the comments below, you'll see links to some of my other related videos. So in this video, I'm just going to be working on the back plates, the rear brake back plate. So I've already taken the rear drums off, and I've got a couple of videos on that. That was quite an undertaking. Disassembled the brakes, and in this video, I'm taking off the back plates, and I'm having to redo the, replace the wheel cylinder and also redo the brake line. So with that said, I'm not an expert mechanic. I do this as a hobby. I'm actually a biologist, but I just want to show you how I did it. I'm not saying you should do it this way, but it's what I've been doing. So with that, let's get on with the video. This first clip shows the back plate before I removed it. And you can see 3 of the 4 bolts that hold the back plate to the axle. And I removed all 4 of those bolts off camera. And you can also see that the wheel cylinder is still attached, and I found it's much easier to remove it after the back plate's removed because there's 2 bolts that hold it in place through the back of the back plate, and it's just much easier to reach those once the back plate's removed. The next step is to release the parking brake cable from the radial spring clip that holds it in place where the cable goes through the back plate. The spring clip has 4 little spring fingers that all need to be compressed at the same time. And that's pretty easily done using a small hose clamp, and after some fidgeting, it allowed the cable to be released. Then I just needed to disconnect the parking brake cable from the parking brake lever. And I used a screwdriver to release the cable from the lever, and then I could feed the parking brake cable all the way out through the hole in the back plate. So I was then ready for the next step. So we're looking at the left rear brake, and we're behind the backer plate. And I just want you to see way back in there is where the hard brake line makes 2 right angle turns and then connects into the brake cylinder that's attached to the brake plate, back plate. And man, that's going to be hard. That's going to be really hard to get to. The only way I took it out on the other side was by cutting it. There are special wrenches for these kinds of fittings called flare nut wrenches. And I made one just by cutting a notch out the box end of a 3/8 inch wrench shown here at the top. But I also needed a flexible one that had a pivot in it. So I looked on Amazon, and they were like $75. But then I found at Advanced Auto Parts, they sold a complete set of 3 wrenches of different sizes that were flexible flare wrenches for $9. So that's what I'm showing here on the bottom of the picture. At this point, the only thing holding the back plate on is the brake line. So I'm cutting it with a pair of tin snips, and then I am removing the back plate. So this side would be toward the inside of the chassis. And here is how the original pipe went. It was connected there. I had to cut it to get it out, but it goes in there. And again, it comes out toward the camera about 1 inch, and then it goes sharply to the, in this case, to this side, and then another bend, and then it comes out, and then these help it follow the axle to where it fits in. This end fits into the other fitting. So I've got to try to redo that by bending some stock 3/16 brake line. So here's what I got. This is a Napa part 813-5454. It's a 30-inch piece of 3/16. And this is a 30-inch long piece. And notice it says on it, well, I don't know if you can read it, but it does say US thread standard flare. So this is what fits on the RV. I bought another piece from another shop, part store, and it was apparently for a European thread, so it didn't fit. So you got to make sure you get this US thread. So when I'm bending tubing, this is my go-to tool, and it has this thing. I don't really use that. I just use it here. Now I want the bend to be about 1 inch from where it's going to stick out. So that'll be about from here. So I've marked about 1 inch there. And you got a little bit of leeway there in this case. But I can't put this thing there because it would put the bend in the wrong place. So I've got to put this over the fitting. And I want to position it so that this line on my bend will be about at the middle of where it goes around. So that'll be just about like that. And then it's steel tubing, but it's designed to bend. So that's pretty good. And then 4 inches down, it needs to come out that way. So 4 inches is about here, right where my thumb is. Use this pencil. So that's where my next mark is going to be. So that looks like about the right place. The mark is here, so that'll put it about in the center here. So I'm going to just bend it about 90 degrees back. We'll see if that fits. If it doesn't, I can do it again. Luckily, this tubing is cheap. Here's the back plate again, and this is the back of the cylinder. And you can see that I've loosely installed the brake line that we bent earlier, and that is a 3/8 inch wrench, and I confirmed that and made sure it wasn't real tight. And then the bleeding nipple, which is right here, I confirmed that it's a 5/16, and it is. So we can take this out, and I'm going to loosely fit it onto the RV and see about the brake pipe. See if we can. And there's a common hose, brake hose, hard brake hose that comes in from the front, and then it curves around. This is the center frame, and then it connects into this flexible hose down here. And I've already loosened it, so I'm just going to unhook it. There. So here's the bottom of that hose. There's a little clip that holds it on. It just clips right in to a groove. You can see the groove right there. And this just clips into that groove and just holds that in place right there. Now the other end of this short flexible hose goes down to here. And it's basically a T. So there's a hard line here that goes over to the left side, and there's another hard line that I've already removed here that goes to the right side brakes. And there's a bolt that holds the fitting onto the differential, and I've already loosened it, so I'm just going to unscrew it, take it off, and we'll go in the shop. So let's have a look at these hoses. So this is the original one that we just took out, and again, look at this end. You can see that there's a threaded side here, and that came over to went with a rigid hose over to the right side brakes. And this I cut, and I'll explain why in a minute, but this one goes to the left hand brake. And the other end is pretty much the same on both of these. They just fit up in that little fitting and get held by that little clip that I showed you. Now these 3/16 brake hose connections here, these must have been soft metal. I don't know if it's brass or whatever, but it's a 3/8 inch nut, and I could not get it off. I had to cut it, and that's why this is cut. And the other side I had to cut as well. So this is the hard brake hose that went to the right side, which I'll have to replace. So there's where I cut it, because I just stripped that nut every time I tried to put a wrench on it. And this is kind of nice. It's got a spring on the outside to protect it from chafe. Now the flexible hose should have had something on the outside, because if you look at it closely, right here, you'll see that there's a big gouge in it. So it chafed through. It was rubbing against something, and it pretty much chafed through. So that's a good reason to replace flexible hoses when you're redoing your brakes, especially when they've been around. These brakes have been on here for 24 years. So anyway, I'm glad I'm replacing this hose. So here's the flexible hose for the back. So it goes up through here. You can see where the clip goes. There we go. That's not going anywhere. So now I just have to screw down this brake line. Main issue is to make sure I don't cross thread it, which I could see doing really easily. So I got it started. It was just a little tricky. Let's get it tightened down, because this is permanent. Just a hope. I don't want to over tighten it, but I want it snug. I can always check it for leaks later, but it's better not to over tighten things. I want to fasten this to where it's supposed to go. This is the original bolt. Threads in there. And tightened. It's a 1/2 inch. And I don't see where anything could have brushed against this thing. I guess the old one just cracked because it was old. I got that bolted down nice. So now we can figure out the length I need to cut the brake line. Parking brake line out of the way. Get out my gray pen. Given I need to bend it a little bit to get it through there, I'm going to cut it. That's good enough. Okay. So we're going to now take off the back plate, take off the pipe, and take it back into the shop and put that protective spring on it from the old one, and then put a double flare on it with the nut. Since this end is going to be cut off, this is the working end. I was having trouble holding it, so I decided to put it in vise. Spin it around, crank it a little tighter, spin it around. Make sure it doesn't start spiraling around. There it came off. So there's our end. And then this has a little reamer. So you're supposed to ream it out. Well, it's a tiny little thing, but still ream it out. There we go. Now we can just slide the spring on. One of those before I forget. So the nut comes off. Spring goes on. That goes on. So now we're ready to flare it. So here's the piece. Move the spring over from the old one to protect it once it's installed. Here's the nut that goes on. And when we cut it, there's a piece for the flaring tool that has to go in the end. But you got to ream it out a little bit because it gets a little tight. And I found the best thing is a pair of scissors for this. And just go around it a few times. On the bigger sized holes, it's really easy. Tubing is easy to use this reamer. There. So now the tool's on there. So the next thing is to fit the pipe so it goes into the right hole. So this is a double flaring kit, and you'll see. So ordinarily, if you flare a piece of tubing, you would just open up the end like that, and that would be the flare. But what we want to do is the double flare. So the first step is to fold it in like that. And then the second step is to open up the flare like that. So the first step of this tool is going to be to take we're going to do this first inside flare. And then where you crone the ends in. And then the second step will be to flare it out again. And that's been shown to be way more reliable than a single flare. When I was a kid, everyone always did single flares, and then the industry switched over to double flares. And that's standard now. So this has to be clamped around the right hole. This is 3/16, so one of these holes is labeled 3/16. And it's going to be a little bit hard to manage. So you want the tubing to be sticking out a certain amount. I'll show you that in a sec. So you want it to stick out pretty much the same length as this shoulder here, so you can see that's just about right. So then you have to make sure it's really tight because you don't want the tubing to slip in this holder. But you don't want to smash the tubing either. So then this goes in, and now this tool goes around, and this operation will make the first part of the flare. That's the inward part. So it's all set. So now I just have to turn it till the shoulder of that adapter there hits. And this flaring kit I got just from Harbor Freight. There we go. There's a lot of good YouTube videos on there on how to do this. So. You can see that it's scraped off all the paint, but it's got that flare. That means it's turned in on itself. So let's go ahead and, so this time we don't use the adapter. So what we want to do now is spread that flare out. We've already curled the ends over, now we're going to spread it out. That's about right. There, we have a nice flare. Get it back out. So we're good to go. The goal of this segment is just to get this backplate bolted on permanently. So I've already got the brake line in. Just it's loose, but I'll tighten it when I figure out exactly the position just before I slide the backplate all the way on. And I've got the nipple just snug, but not real tight, because they're going to be hard to reach with, or even with a wrench once everything's in. I'm going to try to stay out of the camera's way, but it's not always possible. Be slightly tightened so it doesn't wiggle around. Just slides on. And of course the trick is to get the bolts hand threaded before I apply a wrench. There's that one.
These have to be tightened to 100 foot-pounds ultimately. Again, you always want to get them hand snug. And always check by trying to pull them out to make sure you're getting them on right. So this is. So here's the hose running in. That fitting that we bolted on a while back. I've already got it hand started, so I should just be able to crank it down. I think that's good. Again, I don't want to over tighten them. I'd rather have to come back and tighten it up a little rather than jam it in there too much. So that's about it. So we've got the spring protecting everything. It's not touching anything. So I think I'm just going to leave it the way it is. So I got the back plate in. So now these bolts are all hand tightened. Tighten them the rest of the way. Hose, it looks fine. So now I've just got to torque this to 103 pounds. So I'll start over here. I'll go crisscross. You know, when I was a kid, torque wrenches didn't have ratchets on them. So glad they do now. There's that one. There's that one. There's that one. Finally, this one. And I always double check whenever I torque anything. There's that one. And there's that one. So I'm convinced.
Well, let's wrap up this video. I wanted to make sure you, again, look at the comments below where I have links to other related videos in this playlist, all having to do with the brakes and other suspension components, actually, of my Workhorse-based motorhome. And also, you can expect in the next week or so a new video on how I reassembled the rest of the brake components for the rear brakes. So with that, I hope you enjoyed everything, and I'll see you next time. Bye.